Boom. So welcome to Black on Black Education's I'm Anti-Racism versus I'm Not Racist event. Tonight we will be talking about racial stress. We are so excited for folks to be a part of this conversation, and it is so relevant to what is going on right now. So before I even turn a slide, talk about anything else, I really want to give folks space in the chat to talk about the events of the last week. 3 unarmed Black and brown people were in another extremely negative interaction with the police that led to the end of their lives. And when they are children. So thinking about their ages, 13, 17, and 20 years old. I just want folks to have the opportunity to share how they're feeling in this moment. I don't want to go anywhere without us being able to talk about that. So you can come off mute if you feel like you want to. But what are folks' first feelings just coming into the space, knowing that we're in such a, I don't even know the word, time. So I will shut up.
I feel overwhelmed and powerless. So I'm a teacher at Coatesville High School. And so for my students, and then Robin's a parent of young boys. But so a lot of our students, we have a very diverse community. And Robin's one son, her older son who graduated, played on our football team with a lot of Black students. And it's just, I feel powerless to help, and I feel afraid for them. And I don't know, I can't take any burden off of my friends who are people of color. Like, that's just, I feel horrible about that too. So like how I feel, that's just one tiny little minute portion of what others feel. So I don't know how to, so with especially the 13-year-old, the 17 and 20, that's bad, but the 13, that just made it even that much worse, because that's like a middle school kid. And how do we help them? And how do we advocate for them? And how do we not let their families go through what they go through, and their friends, and then other kids who see that?
Yeah.
Our friends that are mothers are terrified for their children to leave the home.
Yeah.
Comfort them and support them and help.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. Anyone else want to share anything? Oh, Jessica, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Maybe it's an unmute and mute problem, or AirPods sometimes cause issues. I definitely want to make sure your voice is heard. So I see you typing. We'll wait for your response right there. Okay. All right. No worries. So we'll come back to you. We're going to have a lot of time for reflection tonight. We're going to have a lot of time to connect with one another about how we're feeling in this moment, but also this is a great time to talk about racial stress, because it is so pertinent. Sometimes when these things are not actively in our faces, we're able to kind of like wade through it. But when it hits you right in the face like it has this week, it's really important to be able to unpack this. So I'm excited to get into it with you. So for anyone who has not been here before, I always like to introduce myself. Who is this person at the top of my Zoom telling me about these things? I love to be able to let you know who I am. My name is Eva Loren Jean Charles. Most people just call me Eva. And I am dedicated to supporting Black students. That has been my dream of my life since I was in high school. And it's so beautiful for it to now have come into fruition. I am a special education teacher. I live and work in the South Bronx. I live 10 minutes from my school, and see many of my students when I go to the supermarket, or I go to the store, or I'm walking my dog. And I studied in a specialized program in college on educational inequity and social justice in underserved communities to uniquely position me to lead conversations like this. And I'm really excited to get into it tonight. As you can tell, we have a small group tonight. And I think that that's very indicative of the change in narrative between this time last year and right now. So it's beautiful that we're in a small group, which means that we can have small group conversation. And I know that there are a few folks who are going to pop in later, but I'm excited to get into it. I don't foresee this issue happening, but we always like to set the tone and land our norms. We have been doing this for almost a year, every single month on a specific topic, really getting into the nitty gritty of what it means to be an anti-racist practitioner. This is not a dialogue. I will not be talking the entire time. I promise you, you will all have the opportunity to speak. And so I want everyone to feel free to ask questions. My chat is open. I can see your questions at all moments. So if anything pops up at any point, I say something you don't like, I say something you don't understand, please stop me, please say your question. If you came just to listen, that happens. Folks love to come in and actively listen. We just want to make sure that you engage either via chat or you talk to someone throughout the session to get the most out of it. And we always like to preface that there are breakout rooms later where you'll get the opportunity to talk to one another. Considering we're so small, we'll probably stay in the big group or maybe we'll pair off, but we'll see. We'll see how the day goes. So let's keep it pushing. Like always, most people's cameras on are already, but we like to make it more personable, be able to see each other's faces. We can skip right past that one. And then we'll go into our icebreakers. So we'll do this as a big group while we're waiting for folks to kind of pop in. But we are taking this next couple of minutes to kind of break the ice. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff that is just very triggering, that leaves so much emotion pent up in our bodies. And I like to get started with something that is fun and something that is light. And so we have 3 icebreaker questions. You can choose whichever one you'd like to answer. But 1, what is your cell phone wallpaper? Or what is a fictional world or place you would like to visit? And what breed of dog would you be if you were a dog? So we have 3 funny ones. You pick whichever one you want. I'll go first. I'm going to pick cell phone wallpaper. Shout out my partner. My background is him and I. The last time I was able to go visit him, I've got my music on here, so it's not letting me show y'all. But yes, last time I went to visit him, we're in a long distance relationship, so I don't get to see him as much as I'd like. And COVID makes it even more difficult, but that's me and him right there. It's my partner. That's my friend. And so yeah, that's my wallpaper. Anybody else have something that they want to share? I'm going to kick it to you, Anna, as our anti-racism veteran.
On my cell phone wallpaper are sort of old pictures of my grandchildren, who are now 7, 4, and 2. So I have to upgrade those pictures. But I like seeing them when they were little.
I know, we hate it when they grow up. And love it at the same time.
Right.
All right. Anybody else? Whoever wants to go next, you can come right off mute. And remember, you can pick any of the 3 questions. You don't have to pick the same one as me.
Is my mic working now?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
We can
good.
hear you.
I was like,
Okay.
I'll try it because I don't know. My wallpaper is my son. He's 5 months old, so I have a million pictures of him, of course. So it's just one of the many.
I love it. We love the little chubby cheeks. I can already envision them. I'm really good at wait time.
So for what fictional world or place would you like to visit? I think I'd have to go with Hogwarts. I think that's the obvious answer to that one.
I like it. All right, 3 left. Who's going? Here we go.
Hi there.
Hello.
I'm gonna go off the wall and do the fictional place I would like to visit. Is counterintuitive because I'd love to go to the good place, not because it's hell, but because the characters are hilarious. I need laughter in my life.
We all do.
So then I'll go the opposite of that. My wallpaper. I have an inspirational. I apologize. I have 2 dogs here, and the one is a puppy, and she just loves Robin. So I apologize for any weirdness that's happening.
Never apologize. My little boy, he will definitely get aggravated with me still being on Zoom and try to pop in later. So
Right.
My wallpaper is a saying, it says, keep going, no matter how stuck you feel, no matter how bad things are right now. No matter how hopeless and depressed you feel, no matter how many days you've spent wishing things were different, I promise you, you won't feel this way forever. Keep going.
Thank you. I needed that. So I hope other people felt it too. That's beautiful. All right. Dondre, Kayla, who's going next? Who's taking it?
I can go.
I knew it.
How did you know? Okay. My cell phone wallpaper is me and my boyfriend, like Eva's is. We went to a museum and yeah.
We love love. Dondre, was it your dog?
Yeah, my dog that I had, she passed away 2 years ago by keeping my wallpaper in my phone.
Oh,
Yeah, that's Stormy. That's her name. She was only 5. Yeah, she was a puppy. 5 years old.
okay.
I have another dog though, so she keeps me happy.
Yes, we love. My doggie is my best friend. So I'm glad we were able to start, breathe, and now we're going to get into it. And so we always like to set the tone, always like to set the room. This slide has pretty much been the same since the beginning of these events. We have not changed it. It is always the same thing. We define anti-racism. And so the way that we define it, although there are different terms and different ways in which people like to express the definition of it, we consider it the work of actively opposing racism by advocating for changes in political, economic, and social life. It doesn't say or social life, it says and social life, because there's political racism, which is systemic. We have economic racism, which is systemic. We have social racism, which affects and impacts the way that we communicate and live with one another. And so, like I said, there are multiple definitions, but this is the one to be mindful of in this space, because it's the one that we set for ourselves here at Black on Black Education. And so we want to start by kind of seeing what the room feels. You can come off mute or in the chat, it's up to you. What do you believe causes racial stress? What are those things that you think causes folks to be stressed out because of the racialized society in which we live? So I would love for folks to kind of either come off mute, put in the chat, what are the first things that begin to come in mind when you think of racial stress?
I personally think of just never knowing the right thing to do or say in fear of doing or saying the wrong thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope in this space you don't have any fear about saying the wrong thing. Let's say what we feel, say what we say, and then we learn and grow together. Anyone else have anything that comes to mind as soon as we unwillingness to address and acknowledge the impacts of racism? Thank you. Having to deal with negative or sad news headlines about Black people, that's a huge one. I'm going to give it another 20 seconds or so if anyone has last minute thoughts that are coming.
I feel like it's the relentlessness of it. It just does not stop, and it's big and it's little. You know, being nervous about whether Chauvin would be convicted or not when, you know, when there's every bit of evidence is just ridiculous. And is that the bar now? Is that what all the evidence that we have to have in the future for when police attack Black people or brown people? It's just, it's really, it's pretty relentless. It's one of the hardest things about it.
Wow, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And if you have other thoughts, please the chat is always there for us. So let's just kind of get started, right? So the first thing that comes to mind for us when we think of racial stress is something called warrior fatigue. When you protest, when you are an activist, oh, I didn't see your message, Jessica. People who are actively ignorant to racism and ignore ways to educate themselves. Thank you for adding that. And I think we'll definitely get into that in this conversation. So, but back to warrior fatigue. So warrior fatigue is this idea that when we are activists, when we are actively opposing racism, we have talked in this session, in this series before about the reality that racism is this fog that's all around us. And even if we can't see it, the way the air is around us and we can't see it, that is how racism exists in the United States and in all colonized parts of the world. And so warrior fatigue are those of us who realize that this is not natural. The way that racism presents itself is not natural. It's not a way of being that people want to be a part of, that people even feel comfortable in. And so warriors, those of us who realize that something has to change, that is a very, very tiring existence. And so protest fatigue syndrome is the fatigue from protesting and activism. Being traumatized by activism means those who can afford to recover will be overrepresented in activism spaces. So it's not only that that people of color have to experience racism, but they also have to fight it. And in many times they have to fight it alone. And which is why those of you said, I want to know how to be an active ally. That is why it's such a beautiful sentiment when folks say, I want to be an ally. I want to go further than being an ally. I want to be a co-conspirator. I want to be someone who is on the front lines fighting with you to change this thing. That helps folks that helps people of color, that helps mitigate the amount of warrior fatigue that they feel. They also get fatigued from having conversations about race or being expected to hold and maintain conversations around race. So how many times have folks that have been an educator, you'll go and ask, I promise you, go ask the Black and brown people who work at your school. How many times has the principal come to them of what do we do? And now they have to go home and read the research and put their hands together and create a packet and for no extra pay, to get the school together in terms of their anti-racist ideology. There's fatigue that comes with that. Being the one in the classroom, the Black child in the classroom in a school that's not so diverse, and they bring up slavery and whoop, everybody's neck snaps. That's fatigue. When the person always feels like they have to have the conversation. They have to be the face of the conversation. That causes fatigue. And so it's important to bring that up. Even when you are actively trying to be an ally, sometimes we forget or we don't recognize that in asking for help in how we get ourselves out of the situation, it also comes with a price to the people that racism negatively affects most. And so we both have to be holding hands together and saying that I'm going to educate myself and I am going to go out and find opportunities to educate myself just as much as I'm going to ask questions to people who are experiencing racism. So now I want to go and start to think a little bit about intersectionality. And what intersectionality is the idea that we are not one thing. Now, not one of us in this Zoom room is one thing. I am Black, I'm also a woman. I'm Black who's a woman and a dog mom. I'm Black who's a woman and a dog mom who has a bachelor's degree and is in the process of getting a master's degree. I have so many intersecting identities that affect the way that people look and see me, but I can't separate any of those from each other. And the same way that there are some people in here who are white and who are also women and then being a white woman who might be educated or might not be, or who is a teacher or who is in positions of power. We have to think about all these areas of our identities and how they intersect the way people interact with us. And so let's look at Heather Heyer, a 32-year-old white woman who was killed when a car plowed into counter protest after a white supremacist rally in Virginia. We all remember this. If we don't remember this, we must be living under a rock with no Twitter and no Instagram, because we all remember this. It was extreme. I don't know. I don't often like talk about my age, but I am quite young. I graduated. I'm class of 2020 in Zoom University over here, and so I was in my freshman year of college when this was happening, something like that. And it was a very just like intense time to have your coming of age story happening. And then we can go and we're going to come down to Dominique. I'm so bad. I hate to mispronounce people's name. Femi Fells and Rhea Milton, who both were Black trans women in their mid-20s, who were found dead in the midst of what some are calling an epidemic facing transgender people. We absolutely have to have this conversation, and we have not had it yet, about the intersections between race, gender identity, sexuality, and we also have to think about how many people know their names. So you might not know Heather Heyer's name, but we remember the story. Do we remember the stories of Dominique Fells and Rhea Milton? And that is important to bring up when we talk about warrior fatigue, because as much as we're fighting for Black cisgender lives, we have to fight for Black trans lives. It's also important to bring up the influx of attacks against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We are living in a time where, because a virus originated somewhere, a whole population of people are being deemed responsible for it. And that is extraordinarily detrimental to our ability to take any steps forward in the pandemic or otherwise. And so these are things that we want to just keep in mind as we continue to fight toward equity. Now, the breakout rooms start real quick. Anna's like, we don't usually get here this fast. But we wanted to talk. We needed to talk. Someone asked me not too long ago, what makes me believe that I'm a good teacher? And teachers are really bad at saying that they're good teachers. I found that. I have talked to hundreds of teachers through my podcast and Black on Black education, and teachers are just really bad at saying, like, I'm a good teacher. I'm saying it. And they asked me what I think makes me a good teacher. And I said, because I don't create lessons around what New York State says, I create lessons around what my students need. And so if you are someone who decided to spend an hour and a half on Tuesday night learning and growing about anti-racism in a time where we have watched on camera the murder of children, well, no, I mean, we have to talk. Like, there's nothing else to be said in that regard. And so I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to do so. So these breakout rooms are going to be 10 minutes or so. Welcome, 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 welcome. Thank you for popping in. We just finished our little talk about warrior fatigue, and now we are popping into breakout rooms. And so in these rooms, we're going to get the opportunity to talk about current events. We're going to get the opportunity to talk about how we have seen racial stress in our own lives. And so I'm going to pose our first question. Our first question is, have you ever experienced warrior fatigue? And I'm going to additionally add, have you ever watched someone experience it? And what did that look and what did that feel like? And so I want folks to get into, one, whatever you want, because I want you to be able to, again, talk about what is going on in the world. But then I want you, in the midst of that conversation for the next 10 minutes, to talk about the experience of warrior fatigue and what it does to your psyche and what it does to your ability to maintain an anti-racist practitioner. Because that's a really important fact on why we have so many people who leave activism as something that they can do for their life. So I'm going to put the question in the chat because I am the queen of forgetting the question once I get into the breakout room. Because we're a small group, I'm only going to do 2 rooms, but I do want people to be able to really talk to each other, particularly right now. Like, it's really weighing on me what has happened in the last week, and I know I need space to talk. So I'm assuming other folks do too, particularly because my school has not even addressed it. Not an email, nothing. So I'm finally going to be able to be in space with people who are ready and willing to have the conversation, and I'm very excited about it. So breakout rooms are opening. Those rooms will be open for 10 minutes. I want folks to get into it, right? And if whatever you need in this space, that's all I want to say. Whatever you need in this space, please take the time to do it. If you talk about my question, great. If you don't, this time is for you. So I'm going to open those rooms. That room will be open for 10 minutes. I will pop into one of the rooms and get to kind of hang out. So I look forward to that. Enjoy. I will see you soon.
So one thing we talked about in our small group is the hesitancy to claim warrior fatigue as a white woman, just because, I don't know, I feel like I feel like that's not the right word in that situation. Like, maybe something similar, but I feel like that kind of, it's not fitting. I don't know how to explain it, if that, kind of makes sense.
I hear that. Anybody else want to kind of expand on it or bring up something else that popped up for you?
So in our group, actually, Deborah and I and Deborah's friend, I don't see the name, so sorry. But we actually talked about the same thing. Like, we were just kind of like, we don't know if we can like, it sounds weird, like we can rightfully say that because like we can, but again, I don't know if Deborah who actually said it, but she was like, we as white people can step away, like we can disassociate.
Mm.
So like as Black people, you live that every single day. And I think like that was our big thing. And, you know, we can experience warrior fatigue, but to the same extent. And because we have that opportunity to take a step aside, like I personally said that it makes me take into consideration talking to people of color, to Black people, like, how are you doing? Like, what, like, you know, if you don't need to talk about this, if you don't want to talk about this, I'm here for you. But like, because that's something that Black people have to experience every day, like as white people, it makes me not like push through that fatigue because I haven't had to do that. I haven't had to experience that. So I have that extra effort. I have that extra in me to push forward where, you know, other people might be done just fucking over it for the day.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot. So y'all was just getting into it. Like, wow, okay. Whoa, it's getting hot. This is not a trauma race, right? It's not a like who's the best advocate and who gets to be a warrior because I'm white. It's not that, right? And I think that it's really hard, one, because most of these conversations are now happening in and on social media, right? And so we have the thoughts and the beliefs of others that so heavily influence our own thoughts and beliefs to the point where we take them on as our own. And so there might be people out there that say like white people can't have warrior fatigue. I'm not one of those people. And I don't think that like even me as someone who experiences warrior fatigue is like, oh man, that warrior fatigue today really hit me hard. Like, so it's not necessarily something that we have to quantify. This person has more of it than this one. I think it's, again, the acknowledgement. So in what I heard you all say is I'm acknowledging that there is no way I can ever feel and understand what it is to be an activist as a Black person, an activist as someone who is experiencing the thing. But that's in terms of race. You might be able to do it in terms of gender, or you might have family members or people who you know, or you might, in here, we might have people who are not neurotypical. We might have people who deal with disabilities. And so we have to start to think of things from an intersectional lens, where although you might have extreme warrior fatigue as a parent of a disabled child, extreme warrior fatigue if we're looking at the education system and how they provide resources for people with disabilities. Extreme warrior fatigue. And so it's not a race, it's not the oppression Olympics, it's not who's had it worse. And I really, really appreciate the acknowledgement of I can't understand this, but I can empathize with the experience because I've experienced it in this way with these people. And so I really appreciate that coming up. Did anyone else have anything that came up for them while they were talking before we kind of move to the next question, which really is just an extension of what you were already talking about?
So I think, so along the lines of what Erin was saying, I don't think that it's not, like, I think some white people can experience it.
Absolutely.
I haven't had that circumstance, but Alma talked about the strides that she's made at working within the school, her son's school.
Okay.
She hit a wall. So she had talked about it, but she also said, so Alma, I'm curious if you think, and I don't know if there's even an answer to this, if you think some of that had to do with being half Puerto Rican, or if you think, I'm not sure if that's part of where you're coming from with that, or if it's just you were working so diligently and putting so much effort into it and not doing self-care that's what caused it.
It's probably the latter. there's, but it's also a web and all interconnected, because I'm in charge of communication. I'm in charge of Zooms. I'm in charge of email reminders and newsletters and answering people's emails and questions as they come in and scheduling the next thing. So it's a lot of work. And people had like no concept of how much work was going into it. And so, it was complaints from the cheap seats. That was part of it. Those started to come in at about the time that I just got exhausted. And we did not put a lot of forethought into our planning this year. We just knew we wanted the topic on the agenda for the school every single month, but we did not realize how much work that would be to maintain that schedule. And then in the meantime, I had volunteers stepping forward who were white and wanted to learn from me. And I needed to explain that's not this space, right? And then I had other people who were like, why are you white and in charge of this thing? And I'm like, well, I'm not. And like, we really need to be careful about how we judge based on what we see, right? First of all, you can't judge based on what you see, and stop judging me as white, because you actually don't know anything about my experience. So there's a lot there. And when it all comes down to it, like, I just let go. I was like, you know what? This is how I said it in our small group. I was like, you bitches just need to take care of yourself for a second, because I'm out. And I rested and I came back. So it's a real thing. And like you were saying, like, we can all relate to this concept, but we also don't step aside your self-care because you're afraid you're overstepping some boundary with somebody else. Because in the end, you're the only one watching out for that for yourself. And if you're fighting, you need self-care, because you just can't do this without that.
Okay, so every single one of these, every single one, somebody just decides that they're gonna just take over. So I'm just gonna send you the slides, and then you're just gonna just do it, because I don't know, what else am I supposed to say?
You're the best, and I can't help. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for that, because it is so important. And a little bit later, we're gonna get into that. So many of you began to already talk about our next question in the second. The next question was really getting into, how do different identities experience warrior fatigue? Or how do you think that different identities experience warrior fatigue? And so since you already kind of talked about the race part, I am going to go in and I'm going to show you this image, which is going to give you the opportunity to kind of look at identity from a different framework. I think very often, particularly now, because we live in a very racially charged society, and we're in a particularly racially charged time, that we immediately go to race when we start to talk about our identities. It's really important to me that when we talk about identity, that we do not forget that we cannot none of us are anything monolithic. We are extraordinarily intricate beings. And so ability, mental health, gender identity, ethnicity, physical health, culture, nationality, age, fertility, race, gender identity, personality, gender expression, I'm going to say them all, appearance, sexual orientation, location, marital status, education, ethnicity, class, religion, occupation, language, and political affiliation are all integral parts of our identity. We walk around with these things every day. Everybody who knows me knows I am a through and through abolitionist, burn it to the ground. That is what I believe in, truthfully believe in. But I believe in taking the necessary steps to get there. We can't burn it to the ground and then have no plan for what we're going to rebuild. And so that's what these spaces are for. And so I want us to just get into how we think that warrior fatigue affects different identities, but then additionally go into how we believe that we can mitigate this in the spaces where we currently exist. So if you're a teacher, what would it look like for warrior fatigue to begin to be fixed? Can't fix it, not the right word. Couldn't think of another one. But how do we lessen the amount of warrior fatigue experienced in our schools, in our homes, within ourselves? Because sometimes the answer is no. Hey, Eva, can you please do a session for the program about the thing because you're so good at? No, I can't. I'm tired. I did 6 sessions this week. I'm a full-time teacher. I'm in a master's program. Can't do it. And that sometimes is self-care, even though I would have a positive impact by doing the thing. I would change maybe somehow how some people felt about the issue. That doesn't mean that I have to give parts of myself and pour out of my half-empty cup in order to do it. So saying no is a part of that. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next breakout group. I want folks to get into how they think that warrior fatigue affects different identities using this beautiful chart here. And then how we believe we can begin to mitigate these in the spaces that we currently live. So as always, I'm going to take a second, make sure that I made up the second question so I don't have it easily accessible, but I'll send it to you in that little green bar when you guys are in the group. Excuse me, gender neutral language. I check myself in front of people on purpose. Folks, people, y'all, have fun in your breakout room. You're going to go back to the same room that you were just in. You're going to go back to the same room you were just in and be able to continue the conversation. I look forward to hearing your reflections when you get back. Everyone, I love when everyone floods back in. I'm like, yay, I'm not by myself. All right. So how did that go? What came up? Anything, what happened? I want to know. I told you my dog was going to start to inch up. He's doing it. You going to say hi to everyone while they think? While they think about what they're going to say, you can come say hi to everyone. Say hello. Say hello, everyone. My name is Chadwick. I'm 7 months old, and I'm a very good boy. Ah, so handsome. They're calling you handsome, Bibs. We love Chadwick. We do really love Chadwick. He's the best. Anything that popped up, anything that was different, anything that you didn't expect to happen. I'll respect the silence if we don't have any new additions, but anything cool that came out of our last conversation.
Alma, can you talk a little bit about the campaign that's going to happen with the parents calling? Because I think that's a really cool notion. And that would be, I don't know. I thought it was cool if you could share that.
Okay, sure. So I was to link this to fatigue and intersectionality. It's away from your bubble diagram, but it kind of works. I was saying that we're taking these little fires that are happening everywhere: student equity, allied teachers, and the parent group that I lead that does DEI work. And we have all finally, after a very long year, have found each other and are banding together. So it doesn't feel like we're all isolated. And so the teachers' feedback, and I discussed it because Deborah brought it up, how it happened to her, where she got into the topic of the speech that Trump gave that incited the riot. And her class broke that down and there was discussion, and I guess it was on Zoom. So a parent heard the discussion and called the school. And so she was practically immediately stopped after class by the principal that said, "What's going on?" Now, there's a whole slew of conversation that Deborah and I will probably have about that interaction. But what I said was, we're flipping the script on that. And next week we are initiating these groups that have gotten together are initiating and coordinating a campaign that'll start next week, where we're having parents, and I didn't stress this, but it's not only parents of color, it will also be white parents, will start inundating the school with calls, but with a different conversation on the other end. Not why are you talking about anti-racism work in the building, but why are you not? It's 2021. What's going on? Why are you behind? What are you doing? My kids aren't safe.
Oh my gosh. Again, Alma, anytime you want to take over, anytime, that's fine. No, but seriously, that's the work, right? And I think that as educators and as an education system, I tell my school leaders this, and get in trouble for it. But we have this notion that we work for the state. I don't work for the state. I work for the parents and families who are trusting me with their children. That's who I work for. And so if the parents and families are banding together and, just like you said, are alleviating that stress by doing it together, if you're in a meeting and a person of color says, hey, wait, we haven't even addressed the fact that we're a high school in the South Bronx that has not addressed the fact that kids that look like the ones we serve were murdered this week. If you can say that there's a problem, and if your parent, if that happens and there's pushback from leadership, sometimes it takes a white voice to come in and say, hold on, I think it's a problem that we didn't do that too.
That's what Erin had said also. And then, of course, when we went out of the room, Erin, I said, Robin, you better start calling, because I teach her 2 sons. She's like, they hear from me enough. But I agree. And Erin even said, it's a shame that's what has to happen. But sometimes because then it is showing that it is not just, especially like, I think, it was Alma who said the percentage of the school was 45% Black. And then, so it wasn't, and that's about our divide also.
Mm-hmm.
I agree then, if you do have the opposite happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to be able to, just in the same way that if I, as a more educated person than someone else, I would stand up and say, hey, but maybe they have an opinion that's warranted. I do that with my students all the time. We're in communication and there's a student who's struggling and then there's another student who's doing a little bit better. It's easy for students to be like, oh, no, I know the answer. No. Everybody's voice is valid here. And my position of power in that situation allows me to say, oh, no, student who's telling this kid they don't know you let them talk. The same way that we can do that in those instances, we need to do them in the instances of race, of gender, of sexuality, nationality, and we can go down the list. So thank you so much for sharing that. Crazily enough, I don't know what we did for the last hour. What did we do? I don't know. We were just talking. So we're running a little behind, so we're gonna make it work. Let's do this, because I think that we're still gonna kill it. That's what I'm under the impression of. So I'm going to talk a little fast, but again, chat is open. Questions are available. We have time. So in the next 20 minutes, we're going to go down memory lane. And unfortunately, when you go down memory lane, sometimes it is really nostalgic and it feels really good. Sometimes you go down memory lane and it feels really, really bad. And this is one of the really, really bad memory lanes. Okay. So we are talking about passing down intergenerational stress. There is so much research, so much rich and beautiful writing about the reality that we pass on stress, we pass on trauma from one generation to the next. And we can look at that and we can witness it in real time in the country in which we live. So we cannot talk about the history of America without talking about the fact that at a point in our country, it was okay, it was legal, and it was advocated for to own human beings. And being a descendant of enslaved people, I always like to address the fact that my grandmother, who I saw yesterday, her grandfather was an enslaved person. And I want everyone to breathe and sit with that. And the reason that we're going to breathe and sit with that is because we talk about enslavement, we talk about chattel slavery as if it was thousands upon thousands of years ago, and how can it possibly affect us now? My grandmother, who is alive, her grandfather was an enslaved person. My grandmother, who is alive, sat on the back of the bus. It is important to make those connections for our students, for those of us who are educators, for our children, for those of us who are in contact with children, and for people who we have these conversations with. Sometimes we allow time to skew us. We can pretend things were a long time ago when we don't break it down in those metrics. So we talked about Jim Crow. My grandmother sat on the back of the bus as a child when she went down south to visit her family. She was not allowed to sit in the front of the bus. And she had to be told at 4 and 5 years old by her parents, oh no, you can't just get on the bus the way that you used to. No, you have to go off the stairs, pay, get back off the bus, go to the back of the bus, and now you can get in. And that had to be explained to her. So when we're talking about how, oh, children, they're too young, how can we be Black children, people of color children, Indigenous children, they're never too young. They have to learn it, which means that our white friends, our white counterparts, they have to learn it as well. So let's continue to talk about passing down intergenerational stress. Since the riots in the 90s, I know me being in communication with my father about Rodney King and what the world looked like and felt like during that time, that was the start of having something on paper. We can talk about the lynchings and the police brutality and the killings that happened all throughout Jim Crow, all throughout enslavement, all throughout the history of America. And then we got to a point where now it was on camera and now people were seeing it. And it caused riots and it caused distress. And now we are looking at this happening with Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Tamir Rice and Dante Wright and so on and so on and so on. And these faces are just a few of the faces of people who've lost their lives and whose trauma is going to be passed down to their families. Their families will never have positive interactions with the police and with the justice system because of what the trauma that they have experienced within their families due to police brutality. Another really important thing to talk about when we're talking about racial stress and its ability to continue to occur is trauma porn. We do a really good job in this country of making a lot of money off of pain. A lot of money off of pain. And so when Black excellence happens, when beauty happens, that's a tagline. But when trauma happens, it's a movie, and then it's a documentary, and then it's a docuseries, then it's a short film, then it's and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. It's important to realize that please, if you choose to watch the imagery, that is your choice. Please don't share the imagery. I have made the choice I didn't watch George Floyd, I didn't watch Dante Wright, and I will not watch because I can't separate George Floyd from being my brother. So for me, the trauma is too much. And it's important that we think about, social media makes it really easy to be impersonal. I'm just reposting this, but if you have 700 followers, that's a potentially 700 people that are going to be re-traumatized by what you're putting out. You can tell them how they can support. You can tell them and inform them about what happened without sharing images of Black life being just completely and totally, I mean, I don't even know what the word is. Just the inhumanity. And there's so much of it on the internet, which then desensitizes the people who follow us to this because they've seen it so many times. So I can scroll past it and go to TikTok. We don't want people to become desensitized to this, to police that look like they're going to war against the people that they're supposed to protect and serve. It got heavy, I know, we're breathing through it. There's also stress when it comes to interactions with the police. And so when you are a person in a privileged body, in a phenotypically privileged body, it is important that you stand up for those of us who do not live in phenotypically safe bodies. I do not like interacting with the police. I have never had a positive conversation with the police officer in my life, never. And so I don't like interacting with the police. My dad, thankfully, is here, but was held at gunpoint by a police officer. And so interactions with the police, I understand how I'm supposed to behave. I understand that my hands need to be clear. I should not be touching anything, no sudden movements. Keep your voice calm. I understand that because that's what I've been taught, because that's what I've had to be taught because of the body in which I live in. So we have to make sure that we don't have our relationship with the police our meaning collectively, you have to think within yourself. The interactions that I have with the police may not be the interactions that others have with the police. And so when kids are loud in the middle of the night outside, maybe calling the police isn't the best course of action. If you're driving down the street and you see maybe what looks like could be a tense something happening, we don't want to put our physical selves in harm, but we do want to bear witness. Because when we have people who are in phenotypically safer bodies that are bearing witness, it is more likely that something will happen than when someone who looks like me is bearing witness. So we all just have to make sure that we stand into who we are, what our identity is, and where we stand as an ally or a co-conspirator, and make sure that we are informing our children of what interactions with the police should look like in order for them to be able to go home to their families. If you have police officers in your family, figure out ways in which you can have conversations with them that would allow them to see people who look like Dante Wright and George Floyd, to see them as fully human. And to make sure that when you are advocate with your vote. The chief of police is an elected position. It matters who sits in that seat.
For example, one of the things we're finding in my research is that this process of racism stress is associated with kind of chronic low-grade inflammation.
And that, says Nuru Jeter, could put someone at a higher risk for something like heart disease. Other studies have found associations between racist experiences and things like sleep problems or even asthma. Researchers like Nuru Jeter hypothesize that the stress of repeatedly being singled out as the other can be biologically damaging and might be responsible in part for health disparities in America, like the gap in life expectancy between Black and white Americans.
Prolonged elevation, circulation of these stress hormones in our bodies can be very toxic and compromise our body's ability to regulate key biological systems. So it just gets us really out of whack and leaves us susceptible to a bunch of poor health outcomes.
Now,
as you can see, I forgot that was going to play immediately upon switching the slide, but it was a beautiful way to talk about the physical effects of racial stress. Being a person of color does not just affect us emotionally and psychologically, it also physically affects us. There are studies that show the difference between women who live similar lives, women who live similar lives, did similar jobs, had similar amounts of children, and they looked at their bodies upon death, and the Black woman was physically 20 years older than her white counterpart. This is a public health issue. People cannot walk around being hypervigilant. They cannot walk around carrying symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety. Our bodies cannot handle that. How are we supposed to pay attention and be in work and do our jobs and go to school when we have memory issues because of the physical symptoms of trauma? It is integral that we all work together as allies and co-conspirators to reduce the amount of racial stress that is on people of color. This is a collective work. When we talked about white dominant culture, we talked about the fact that it is community that fixes the problems that we are seeing in our society. It is collectively building community with one another. And so we cannot end this conversation without talking about coping mechanisms and ways in which to fight against racial stress. Allow yourself time to process and to grieve. Yes, you can grieve someone who you've never met. I have never met Dante Wright. I have never met George Floyd. I never met Mike Brown. I never met Tamir Rice. But I grieved their losses. Probably Trayvon Martin. I was in high school and it was day after day as if I knew him. As if I knew him. Because we all know someone like him. And if we don't know someone like him, we need to diversify the people who are in our circle so that you can get to know someone like them, so that you have an emotional connection with the people who this issue is most strongly affecting. Take a step back from activism when you need to care for yourself. You cannot help others if you are pouring from an empty cup. You cannot help others when you're pouring from a half empty cup. I don't care if that cup is 3/4 full. I don't care if it's 3/4 full. We only give from our excess, and we cannot have excess if we do not care for self. So as much and as heavy as the last 10 minutes of me talking has been, tonight, I am going to care for myself. After this, I'm logging out. Gonna enjoy the rest of my night, watch some TV, cuddle up with my dog. It's gonna be great. Because I did my activism work for today. I know what my activism work is going to be tomorrow. I know how I'm going to stand for what I believe in. I know how I'm going to live into my core values. And I need to fill myself up just a little bit more because I'm tired. And that's how I can walk into tomorrow being the best possible advocate. Build a support network. No one does it alone. No one. Not me. I used to try to do Black on Black education by myself. Didn't work out. Now I have an incredible team and I love them all dearly. And they stand with me. And that is why I'm here in one piece. I promise you. I have friends in here too. I love y'all. Y'all know who you are. Anna, you too. You my friend. Attend therapy. Oh my gosh. When I have whole therapy sessions where I'm telling my therapist how much I love her. Like, it's not even about me. I'm just telling her how much I love her, because therapy, man, somebody is paid to listen to you. Why is there stigma around that? I don't quite understand. I don't. And so we also have, and these slides will be sent to you and the video will be sent to you. We also have all of these different organizations that make sure that they talk about wellness, share these resources, share these things with people of color who you know are pushing themselves to the limit to get there, to fight for what we should all already have. Yes, therapy equals joy. Latinx therapy, ourselves Black, therapy for Latinx, therapy for Black men. Oh, please, Black men, get some therapy. South Asian mental health, therapy for Black girls. Yes, Black girls get therapy. Wellness Beam, yes. So, a Southern Asian mental health, absolutely, particularly with what's going on right now. Take care of yourselves. You'll have access to this information, so you keep going. We were supposed to keep talking, y'all. Obviously, we're not gonna have time to do that. But we already talked about the ways in which we can prevent warrior fatigue. And we all know everyone in here is going to walk into tomorrow actively trying to help the other people around them reduce the amount of stress that they're feeling, because the physical, we're not even talking about the mental, the physical issues that come along with carrying stress are such a huge issue that we need to make sure that we are attending to. And so we do want to let you know about our critical self-care in a pandemic session. We led the session in February and we remixed it. We created it so that it can be an interactive experience that you can take on your own, that walks you through and gives you very real, tangible tools around what your triggers are, for you to be able to identify what a self-care plan would look like for you to be able to identify what it would look like for you to thrive. So please, if you are someone who is a chronic giver, check this out. It is 10% off until Wednesday, which is tomorrow, when it officially launches. So if it's something that you are interested in, check out the link in the bio and you can be a part of that. We usually have plenty of time for questions. If any folks have questions, please put them in the chat. I will save the chat and then I will email you the answer to the question. I always like to preface questions with, I am not the advocate for Black people. I cannot answer, how do all Black people feel about this question? But I can answer how Eva Loren Jean Charles feels about it questions and point you in the directions to get more diverse thoughts on whatever question that you ask me. And then now we just kind of have a few updates before we end. Post-event survey, this helps us so much. I thrive off feedback. I want to know what was great about this session, what was terrible about this session, how much I was great, how terrible I sucked. Anything, please let me know, because I want to make sure that we make these events as best as we possibly can so people keep coming back. Last but not, this isn't the last thing, but we also accept love offerings. We need support. Doing this work is tiresome. Doing this work is difficult. And if you felt like you got something out of this and you have anything to give, we would absolutely appreciate it. And this is how you contact me. My name is Eva Loren Jean.
Your sound cut out.
And I again, can you hear me? Are you losing me?
So you just came back, so just revert back just a little bit. I am Eva Lauren Jean Charles. I'm from there.
My AirPods like love to just connect when I didn't ask them to. Okay, great. So you can reach out to me, Eva at blackonblackeducation.com, Instagram at blackonblacked, Twitter at blackonblacked. I am super accessible. I answer my emails every single day. So I will get back to you if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything that you want to share with me. Black on Black Education t-shirts. No one in here is rocking one today. But, oh, Anna, are you rocking yours? Yes! Anna is the MVP. Oh my goodness. If you want to support Black on Black Education in another way, you can buy one of our t-shirts. That's my dad and co-founder. He's not here tonight. He had to go do some other wonderful things running for school board. So but we do have t-shirts available on our website, blackonblackeducation.com. We've got them in white, black. We have Nelson Mandela quote on the back. Education is the most powerful weapon with which you can use to change the world. And I ain't never heard a quote more true. Y'all are awesome. This has been great. And I have 1 minute to spare. I killed it. I'm just, big up yourself. That is self-care as well.
Thank you
How are
so
we
much.
doing? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everyone have a fantastic night. Take that minute back. Use it to practice what you're going to do for self-care. I am obsessed with you all. Can't wait to see you next time. Have a good one.